be fine.
All right.
Yeah. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, people of LinkedIn. Good morning if you are watching this on YouTube. Good morning, Sal.
Morning, Cheryl. How are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. I'm guessing that for a lot of people, if they're joining this, because I know obviously you're on LinkedIn quite a lot, Sal, but we don't often hear you talking on LinkedIn. So this might be a first for somebody. Some people might be like, Sal got a Scottish accent.
I always get that. People think there's something wrong with the audio, and then they realise,
Yeah,
Aisha, that
yeah,
it's always a conversation starter. I worked in London for 5 years, and you get obviously every nationality there, but nothing melted the mind more than the Scottish accent, I've got to tell you.
yeah. I can imagine. Yeah. So, good morning. If you're joining us live, I know some people watch this while they're getting ready for work and they have it on in the background, or while they're on their morning walk or walking the dog or whatever. If you're watching us live and it's safe to say good morning in the chat, then please do. Obviously, if you're driving, you don't need to put a good morning in the conversation. Good morning, Donald. How are you doing, Donald? Big Sal. It is Big Sal. Is that what is Sal? Is that what they call you? Sal, one of the,
When I was
I
in
think it was,
Scotland, they used to call me Wee Man, so I'll take things.
yeah, yeah. Big Sal. Good morning, Donald. Donald Mbucha or Mabucha. Hopefully, I'm not butchering your name, Donald. Thank you for joining us. Yeah, we've got Sal in the house. For anybody that doesn't know Sal, please do go out and check out Sal's bio. There isn't really long enough to fully do justice to Sal's bio. Is the reality. But for anybody that I'm going to embarrass Sal very slightly just by saying, if you want to really understand Sal's story, then you've got to check out his book, which is the incredible book called True North. And then we've got another good morning that's come in. Apologies, I can't see the name because sometimes with the technology, the name doesn't always come in. Donald Butcher. Hopefully that's how I pronounce your surname. Thank you so much, Donald. We've got here. Let me just see. We've got Pauline Isherwood. Good morning. Two of my favorite LinkedIn people. What a treat. Pauline, good morning. It's really lovely to see you. And I wonder if Pauline's got the book actually and has read it. But yeah, it's an incredible book. I was privileged to have attended the launch, which that in itself was an absolutely fantastic night. But yeah, for anybody that doesn't know Sal, please do go out and check out his full background. Go and check out the book. It is incredible, and it's had some, and it's a challenging read in parts, most definitely, but it's really had some incredible feedback and people have found it incredibly inspiring. Good morning, Junior Beeman. How are you doing? Sal Junior is one of the network leads, global network lead, apologies, Junior, global network lead for the multicultural network at NatWest. Yeah, so a few network leads in the house. For anybody that doesn't know Sal, I guess the role that that I don't want to say made Sal famous, but the role that Sal is probably best known for. and we're not talking just LinkedIn famous, right? So we know that there's LinkedIn famous, but then there's really kind of like well known, like in the public eye, because you are sort of well known in the public eye, and that was your role as the regional director for London for the Independent Office of Police Conduct, which as I think I put in the post for this. Probably, of all of the people that I know, kind of like in my, sort of like circle of acquaintances and friends, it's got to be like one of the toughest jobs that I know of, right? And, and so that's why if anybody wants to know more about that experience and I guess how that has shaped you, right, Sal, in terms of the person you are, it's definitely worth reading the book. So yeah, this is Sal Naseem. Thank you everybody for joining. Sal, how's your week been? How's this week been for you?
It's been heavy. I think it's been heavy, you know. So obviously, look, I'm desperately looking forward to the weekend, like everybody else. But yeah, it's heavy at the minute.
Yeah, I think that's a good way of describing things. And in terms of what we're going to talk about today, you know, we've got the title of moral courage, because obviously, you know, Sal goes into organizations and talks about, you know, not only your experience, but what that means in terms of leadership. And what's really interesting, you know, Sal, as you're saying, you know, things are incredibly heavy at the moment. And so I guess that's where, you know, things like, you know, leadership and moral courage kind of come into their own, right? When the world is like this, which it feels as though it's been for quite a while, right?
I think what we notice really in public life is the absence of moral. If you think of any of the leaders that we've kind of just in the public facing celebrated and recognized and still speak about years after their passing, they all demonstrated this willing to kind of put themselves on the line, thing more than themselves. That's the kind of quality of moral courage that we really well understand, but also where do we really see it in present day? When you do see it, you're really drawn to it like a moth. But the absence of it right now, I think, is the cause of so much, is a contributory cause all around us at the minute.
Yeah. How do you define moral courage? I know that one of the things that you posted this week was about Gary Lineker and his win, but just put it into words for us, you know, and you talk about like leaders of the past. How do you define it? What does it mean to you, moral courage?
I think somebody that's willing to stand up for knowing the risks and still doing retreating. So there's many different articulations, but it's somebody that's willing to do that it's more, it's for something bigger than themselves. And I think when I post actually, and we'll probably get into it and probably on my experiences, there is a strong theme of moral courage without overt and, you know, using the word every third paragraph. I am trying to exhibit this, you know, in ways that they probably don't even understand and sometimes can be subtle and implicit. And actually, most of the people in my network exhibit this and probably don't even recognize this. But moral courage can look like some of the things that we really understand out there. But there's also a different, more subtle understanding of what that can look like in leadership that we probably don't really understand as well.
Yeah, it's interesting. You said there about you know, I guess standing for something, right? Standing for effectively for what is right, and that does link on slightly to perhaps the slightly trickier view, the trickier topic of what we can and can't say at times, right? Even on, for example, you know, platform like LinkedIn. And one of the things I was saying before we came on live is, you know, one of the reasons that I like having these sorts of conversations is because, I mean, social media in particular, I don't think is well suited to some quite complex topics, right? But I think you're talking there, and if we use, say, for example, somebody like a Gary Lineker, that sometimes there are things which somebody needs to take a stand on and or say something, and maybe, you know, moral courage is that aspect of, will somebody actually take a stand on that thing, and potentially will they even be vocal about it? What are your thoughts around, I guess, some of the challenges of being in environments, whether it's on social media or in the corporate environment, where it becomes tricky to say certain things? What, you know, do you have a view about that and or advice?
don't think this is something that I can say that lends itself to like a quick sticking plaster. And this is the thing that will cover all eventualities. Got to consider it in the round, and how you exhibit it doesn't necessarily mean icing your career every single time, because then potentially change things if you're not even at the table or you don't have any leverage. But sometimes, there's a spectrum of it, I suppose. There's a spectrum of it. How you choose to use your voice and how you choose. I mean, you're talking media, so let's focus on voice for a second as opposed to actions. I've got this really simple rule for LinkedIn, because that's what I use, and I won't say anything on LinkedIn that I wouldn't be comfortable saying to you in person, across from you, or professionally. So if I'm not comfortable or I'm not able to do that, then I won't. So there's nothing that I'll express publicly that I wouldn't privately and professionally. And that's really the yardstick that has kind of just kept me, Cheryl. So, because I think you get this phenomenon, warriors and whatever, and I know the world is at the minute, but I suppose taking a stand and what that means, you have to think, well, what does that mean? As one social media post, is there other things within the mix? So obviously there's the stuff that I speak about on LinkedIn, but there's more important, actually, the important stuff is actually what I do. Whether that's, the charity work, whether that's the trusteeship, whether that's things which I never speak about on LinkedIn. The other things, and LinkedIn is just thinking out, sharing perspectives, but sharing them in a voice that I would always feel comfortable, as if you and I were having a coffee when no one was watching.
Yeah, absolutely. And you sort of like just bringing it back to the things that we would say in real life, right? And almost like using that as a yardstick. So Sarah O'Sullivan, good morning, Sarah. Sarah said many times, so I assume this is Sarah, we're talking here about standing up for things, right? Many times and potentially speaking up. And I will do it again for the greater good of all of my patients and clients, for effective practice and quality care and consideration, even when it is hard. And that's the thing, I guess, because this concept of moral courage, the courage bit is when it's even really hard, right? That's the bit, isn't it?
I mean, the reason why I became by this is that I had a career where I always found myself, saying the difficult things, and then when I ended up in really, I had the possibility to affect change, but it was always me. It was me pointing out the difficult things, making the difficult things, and risking myself professionally and eventually my career, do the right thing. And then it sometimes boils down to something as simple as that, Cheryl. There is the right thing on the table, and then there is risk, and then there's all the other things which come with being ensconced in the system and the groupthink and everything that comes with it. But then this is the thing you should really do. There might be good reasons why we've never done it, but you do. And my time, particularly, working in my former organization, it was just a collection of tiny battles, small battles, large battles, where it was all rooted in this that I didn't really understand properly back then. But it was because I wasn't thing, and that's probably because of the experiences I had growing up and other things. But then, when I left, I thought, and I can have consultancy. Well, what? I'm not exceptional. I'm really not. Why should sat on my shoulders? Why weren't other people more prepared speak up and get their voices heard. Because I tell you what, after I used to speak, people would normally come up to me and say, "Well done for saying it."
Yeah.
I was the tip of the spear. What other metaphor you want to come up? And then people would silently congratulate you while never backing you.
Yeah. Why do you think that is? Why do you think, why do you think people don't speak up? What is it that stops? What's the blocker to the moral courage? Why is it that people don't speak up? And it could be, obviously in the organization, it could be the organization, it could be the culture, it could be, there's all sorts of reasons. But what do you think stops people, particularly, whether it's in society or in organizations, from standing up for the right thing?
The first thing is it's really hard, isn't it? It's hard to be something different. It's hard to metaphorically above the parapet, whatever that different opinion or voice is. Studies have shown that the majority of people have high moral reasoning, so they understand what to do is, but actually they lack the self-confidence in themselves to say it. So self-confidence plays a part, but there's also this idea of belonging and perversely playing a negative role here.
Yeah.
To say something different means that you're going against that feeling culture of belonging. And you don't really want to upset that, and you still want to kind of group. So inevitably that means that you will weigh the kind of desire to say the thing. And I look, this is just me with my years of experience. Other people have different opinions, but we will all walk away sometimes thinking, wish I'd said it. We'll feel it in our core, in our DNA, in our fibers, that thing that we say, and we just couldn't say it. And I've had meetings like that as well. I've never been in the place where I've 100% been able to. But on the things that always mattered, I just developed a way of just consistently. But that way doesn't lie an easy life, I would say that.
That's really interesting. It sounds like, as you say in your role, and I guess that was, for an organization like the IOPC, for example, it's kind of, that's what you're there to do, right? You are there to kind of like, sort of like challenge, agitate, etc. But still, it's the way you described it there was almost like it's like a muscle that you have to exercise it and you have to develop it. Otherwise, it will kind of retreat, and shrink, and you'll find yourself not being able to speak up. But also the other thing that you said, it kind of made me think about the belonging and the groups. We know that conformity to groups, we're social animals, and we know that if we don't conform to the group, we might get kicked out of the group and we might die, right? That's the evolutionary response to when something's going on and we don't agree with it, which that definitely makes it really interesting. I'm fascinated by the psychology of groups. We'll definitely get into, I guess, some tips maybe that you've got around how people start to exercise that muscle. Do you know what I mean? Like on a practical level, what it is that that people can actually say. I'm just going to jump really quickly into the comments. So Pauline has put here, Sal, you've got this so right. One of the things I really admire is that you don't let your passion or views be one-sided. Not many people can do that well. They don't realize that passion can switch people off. That's exceptional. I think Sal is pretty passionate, to be honest. But but it's interesting. You said earlier, I think in the conversation, Sal, about that balance of like professionalism and all of that. And to be fair, Sal, if you meet Sal in real life, he does normally swear like a trooper. and he's promised me that today there will be no no profanity. So maybe he does leave the passion off the platform. Pauline, you might be right. Good morning, Sophia. Sophia said it's great to know we're all different, and some people have the skill to be morally courageous, and others need their voices heard through others. Yeah, that's definitely one way of looking at it, Sophia. We cannot all be leaders. Okay, so we'll get into this. Sal, I want to get your thoughts on this. We cannot all be leaders. Well done for being the leader. Self-confidence and self-awareness needed here. Being prepared to be the odd one out. We need leaders like you. I'm definitely going to come back to you on Sal, Sal, about whether you agree with that in terms of that some people maybe are just made to kind of be able to speak up and some people aren't. Let me just go on to the next one here. Sarah, I believe that people are scared to speak up. People have lack of cultural awareness. They have fear, and people are scared of change. People are scared to go against the norm. Some people just want paychecks, but do not want to drive change due to fear of rejection. You go against the grain and imbalance, but ultimately change is inevitable and important to evoke a response and a community action. Thank you for bringing this important topic to light, both. You're so welcome. Sal, what are your thoughts about that in terms of maybe some people are just made, just wired to be more courageous, and maybe not everybody's got that leader gene in them, right? What are your thoughts on that? I think it's an interesting point.
I think respectfully, I don't agree. Respectfully. And I'll tell you why. I'm a very reluctant leader. I was never meant to do this. I was never meant to have a mug on LinkedIn. I would have loved to have a quiet life and financially comfortable and all that stuff. So all this stuff has never been was never part of my intention or even my DNA. Yeah. I think how we treat leadership and how we speak about it and all the hundreds and thousands of books that have been written about it almost create this mythology that, that there are some people who are leaders and then there are the rest of us who aren't. And I don't buy that. We all have leadership qualities inside us. And what leadership looks like doesn't have to be like 100% switched on all the time as well. There are moments in our lives where we have to lead, and we find some of those moments. And I think I'm one of those people that, was faced with certain situations and I led and I found a way. And that's the reason I have certain stories and experiences to share. But I absolutely believe, use the metaphor of a muscle. It's a muscle that we all have. We all have the same anatomy, but others have learned to grow it. Others have learned to strengthen it. But we all have the same basic anatomy. And that can be quite a hard thing to understand and sit with. But we do, because somebody who speaks about this stuff like me has just had the opportunities to exercise it and has the stories to share. Yeah. But that's because I've exercised it and it's strong now and I can share it. But we all have the same leadership anatomy inside us. So I don't want, if there's anybody listening to this conversation today, the one thing I'd ask you to take away is to understand that when Cheryl and I speak about this stuff, I don't want people to think that this is distinct and separate possibility far away from them. This absolutely belongs to everybody, because I've lived it and I've breathed it, and I've also actually seen remarkable people exhibit reluctantly when they had to. So
yeah, I think it's really interesting. Thank you, Sophia, for that point, because obviously we're not an echo chamber, so it's interesting to look at this from a slightly different lens here. So just sort of circling back on the comments. So Martin Griffin, good morning, Martin. Leadership is influence, not necessarily with the loudest voice in the room. And then echoed ironically by Sarah, who said you can be the quietest in the room and evoke change and discussion. And Martin has also added here, I agree with Sal. I'm an introvert by nature and extrovert out of necessity, which in the West, a lot of leaders, we tend to value a very extroverted, gregarious leadership style. raising awareness about disability in workplaces. So that view of this isn't this isn't a personality trait, I think is the point there. Let's see if I can just bring this comment up here. Apologies that I can't see your name, but isn't it interesting that that idea of having moral courage feels a bit scary, like putting your head above the parapet? But shouldn't we all have a moral compass? And what's really interesting, I don't know who put that comment, but I don't know whether they've got Sal's book, but there is a compass on it. And you said something, Sal, about our inner thing, right? And for you, I guess that's where you kind of use the compass as being like that thing, like that we all have this internal thing that kind of calibrates us towards the what is right. Good morning, Deirdre Lebassier. I've had to show moral courage when an exec team tried to weaponize a policy that would disproportionately police Black and brown people. That weight of staff and customers impacted is heavy. For those of us who are on the receiving end of discrimination, the real challenge is this: how do we call it out with courage and protect our safety? That's an interesting question that we may go back to. Sal, Brene Brown has written on this subject, absolutely, in terms of leadership and courage. It is confidence and fear as rejection is real when people speak up. Okay, let's go back to, Sophia's, I agree that we all have a voice. It's just different in the way we use our voices. Some share in public, others on a quieter level. Sophia, thank you for coming back to that. And then Alicia, our true north, the compass. Should we go back to this question around how do we, so where, for example, so we're linking it now to the treatment of a particular group or of, say, individuals. How do we call it out with courage and also protect our safety? So I think a really good example there, Deirdre, in terms of, somebody's maybe in an organization or in a society and a policy or something has come out that seems to be unfair, particularly to a particular group. How do you, stand up for that thing, raise it, call it out, and also protect our safety? Or actually, are those two things, mutually exclusive? So,
talk about hospital pass, Cheryl. Yeah, I've definitely got some thoughts about that. I also want people, I suppose I want to start by maybe breaking down an idea around what this looks like. Because I think when we're speaking about calling things out, immediately you're thinking saying something full caps in a heated meeting and that's it. But that doesn't have to be it. You have to think about your strategy in calling things out. And when I did the work that I did in IOPC, and like the things that I did were like at a national level around stop and search, around misogyny, anti-racism, really, really big things where these issues were centered. If I was just the person in the room constantly speaking in metaphorical full caps, I would never have lasted and I would never have got anything over the line. So I had to strategize and I had to think, well, how am I actually going to do it? And that meant having 360 vision and going to the left, going to the right, and doing whatever it took to make sure that these things were landed. Now, sometimes that would include having difficult conversations and meetings, but also sometimes that would include, and building allies, for instance, so that when you are raising difficult things, that you have built up some support for this, so that whilst they might not be willing to kind of stick their neck on the line, they're not going to stand in your way. Now, that can be equally powerful. And I want people just to think that there are different ways that you can exhibit this. It does not have to be the thing where you are one against many in a meeting and sweating and finding your heart pumping and having to say that really horrendous thing. It can sometimes be in the paper that you've written, the strategy you've done, conversations you've had. It can be a myriad of ways that you can do this. And I say this as somebody who's done it, And now, the weird thing is I've got this portfolio of stuff that I can look back now years later and understand actually that stuff has outlasted me. But the only reason that I was able to do that was by having a range of tools in front of me and understanding which one to pick up at the right time and which one to use and how to use it.
Yeah, I love that. A few things there, like so having that range of tools and that range of approaches. I've never heard that phrase, talking with full caps on. I'm definitely going to start using that. Yeah, there is something about in terms of how we say things. And I love also there is that thing in terms of that strategy. If you've got to raise something, it doesn't necessarily have to be in a public meeting where you've got 20 people in a room, and that if you challenge the individual in the a senior individual in a meeting, for example, that they're now going to be full of ego because they're now going to want to protect their public position. You can start the challenge very strategically with one-to-one conversations, behind the scenes. You got to know how to think politically with some of these things, especially if you're in an organization. Then when you get into the room, then you can potentially, you've got, as you said, Sal, you've got allies in the room. The other thing I would add into that as well, actually, this is something I tell people when they're seeking board approval for something. I actually say also speak to the people that don't agree with you. And then when you get in the room, say, oh, I know, Sal's got a point that doesn't agree with mine. Sal, do you want to just explain what your point is? And you almost just like cut them off at the pass. Right? Just like be strategic in terms of how you tackle it and, show that you recognize that there are different views and that you're taking them all into account is just one of the things I would add as well.
One of the other things I'd just add to that, Cheryl, and this might seem counterintuitive, is never show your emotion when you're doing this. Now, that might seem counterintuitive, but I've had so many instances where people have tried to provoke me. I've sat opposite politicians when for an hour they've tried to goad me, and I have never allowed anybody to get a rise out of me. It's really powerful if you can make your point, and you can make your point with strength and with power, but you never allow the emotion and the passion to overpower you, because people will come to the left of you and to the right of you, and it will be in subtle and different ways. But if you and this is definitely a learned skill, because I did, if you learn not to do that, it's remarkable how you can land your points and how difficult you are to deflect them.
Yeah. I think that's that's something I've heard. As you started saying that, it made me smile because Junior Beeman that was on here before, it's something that we talked about in terms of even like when looking for leaders of employee networks. One of the things that Junior always says is you almost don't want people that are too passionate because they get incredibly emotional and to the point that it makes them ineffective. Which I think is really interesting. Sophia's put here, I love the way you share that these things need planning and support. Speaking at the wrong time can lead to harms. That's a good point, Sophia, in terms of timing. That it's not a case of, you necessarily need to say everything straight away. So picking your timing works. Resources, approaches, and allyship provides safety and enables diverse voices to be heard. Thank you for that point, Sophia. And Martin, but what if my emotions are hard to control due to my autism? Even with practice, it's really hard. Sal, I'm going to throw that one over to you.
Yeah, look, I'm on the spectrum as well, Martin. I understand from my own way. I'm not saying this is the only way. I'm saying what I have found effective. Other people will find different ways to do it. It's just in the environments that I was in, I was provoked all the time. And when I learned what was happening and not to give in to the provocations and not to fall into the traps, then I became more effective. I became very difficult, actually. I became very difficult for people to deflect and for them to block me. So it's just what I found effective. And that's not the case to say, look, I don't speak with emotion, but I choose when to do that. So if I want to make an impassioned point within a talk or a point that I'm making, I will use that. But it's just what Cheryl was alluding to there and what somebody else said. It's when the level of passion can overcome your effectiveness. And all I'm saying from my perspective is that this was something I practiced and I improved. But if you find a different way, then I'd be open to listening to that as well.
Yeah.
This is just what for me.
Yeah, absolutely. There are lots of topics that we could have talked about in terms of where we started the conversation. There are a lot of things going on. There are lots of topics out there, and some of them we've covered here on some of the lives, so things like Gaza, the rise of the far everything, the far right, the far left, everything. What are your thoughts on how leaders should be navigating some of those difficult topics? Should they kind of like, a lot of organizations are kind of almost like taking the stance of, we just don't say anything, we don't want to even get anywhere near to anything that is vaguely political. A bit like we started off like with the Gary Lineker as an example of that. And wasn't it amazing the applause that he had when he talked about, if I've got a platform, I'm going to use it. I mean, people were just like, yeah. Well, what are your thoughts about, I guess, almost like the sense that, especially for leaders in organizations, that they maybe feel as though they're in a straitjacket, that they can't, speak and or stand up for communities or for issues because of those constraints of organizations? How do they navigate that challenge?
I understand the fear. I think with that fear comes paralysis, and then with paralysis comes nothing.
Yeah.
And I think that's why a lot of leaders struggle. And I think the leaders that embody this some moral clarity and moral certainty and have this compass, I call it true north, this idea of true north and understanding of values and how you show up and having that consistent throughput personally and professionally.
Yeah.
Having that sort of compass is incredibly effective in these times, Cheryl. And I say this again as somebody who's lived it, breathed it, and done it, because it gives you your own kind of internal navigating system, your own Google Maps for leadership, if you can call it like that.
Yeah.
And in times of sometimes corporate uncertainty or the absence of what is the right thing to do, if you've worked on that and you've calibrated it in the right way, it can provide you a guide. And I say this because there was many times, for instance, when I was working in police misconduct, when I was director for London, where there was no steer. So, for instance, I was director for London when during 2020 you had COVID, but you had the murder of George Floyd, you had the Black Lives Matter protests, and policing accountability became a global news story, fleeting particularly its relationship with Black people and the racism and all those issues. And my job suddenly became very, very high profile. And yet my organization was paralyzed by fear. They didn't know what to say, what to do. And I ended up stepping up because of the absence of, frankly, the absence of leadership. That's why you see my mug so much on Google. If you Google it from some of the stuff that I did at that time, because nobody else was willing to do it. But those actions and stepping up and speaking up a little bit more and finding my voice and the things to say, it was all an uncertain journey, but it was all guided by those values and that moral compass, and learning to act with it even in times of uncertainty. I think actually that's the greatest gift of it. If you learn to lead like this and you learn to live like this, it gives you a guide in uncertain times. And when you sometimes come through those uncertain times and you realize actually where you were and how you showed up, and that can look very different, you then understand the true value of it. I do. That's why I bang on about it so much, actually.
Yeah. Do you think that some leaders, though, have a fear of like saying the wrong thing or being, do you know what I mean? Like being, I don't want to use the whole like cancel culture thing, but, or being called, that we have kind of created a climate where, I mean, we've seen it, I think I'm going to say, I think it was in 2020 that one of the KPMG the KPMG CEO at the time, I want to say, said something that basically, you know, got in the sack pretty much. So how do we, you know, is there something about the responsibility that we also have as the receivers of, you know, some of these things that come out, whether we do or don't agree with them? You know, do we have a responsibility to almost like not perpetuate a culture where people are going to literally be vilified for everything they say? I don't know. Do you see a relationship between the two? The fear of people to speak up and say what they think, and the kind of cancel culture?
So the easiest thing is to say nothing, which is, I've had a career full of people. I've been surrounded by people who've said nothing and actually made no decisions, because that's the easiest thing. It's risk-free, isn't it? And for certain people, that's fine, because that's how they choose to lead. Actually, it's not leadership, but that's their choice. But then there's this thing about, well, what is the right thing to say? What is the wrong thing to say? And I definitely think it's a spectrum, Cheryl. You know, sometimes you see people trying to say the right thing, but getting it wrong. And I'll give them grace. And I think, you know, I think they'll have acted in good faith, and that's different. Yeah. But then what you're seeing now is, particularly now, people saying actively racist things, and I will not give them grace. And I will not say that they acted in faith when they're actively talking in a racist way, and they know they're talking in a racist way, but right now they've got cover to do so. So I think, look, and then you throw into the mix social media, which is just promotes binary, angry responses. And the reason we're having this conversation is good luck trying to have this conversation on LinkedIn, you know, the comments thread or something.
Yeah.
It's impossible, because the whole ecosystem thrives on disagreement, rage bait, and all that sort of stuff. Yeah. So you do have complexity out there, but then you've got a spectrum. You've got a spectrum where you say nothing and you have an easy life, or you try and say something, and maybe we have to learn to accept that not everybody will get it right and they're freezing and stuff. But you've got to kind of consider everything in the round. And then you've got the other end of the spectrum right now, where people are saying actively, I'm going to focus on racism, because racism for me right now is at the top of the political discourse. Are saying actively racist things, and consciously and knowingly so. And for that, then there can be no grace.
Yeah. Yes. There almost isn't long enough to go into this. Suffice to say, part of the reason I smile is, and this is something, Sal, you and I have talked about in terms of like different strategies, and I'm totally with you in terms of, in fact, this is where you've rubbed off on me slightly. I've certainly blocked a few more people on LinkedIn in the last 12 months or so, right? Because that there is something about, and I don't do it very often. And you know me, that I for starters, I don't like living in an echo chamber. And this is, you know, for me, this is one of the biggest problems in social media, is it creates these echo chambers. So I actively seek sort of different views, but I want those views to be kind of informed. I don't want it to just be some random person that doesn't know what they're talking about, that's spewing hate. That I'm just completely blocking, right? Because people on the internet are weird. Is the reality of the situation. But interestingly, when you said about the whole racism thing, and you know how we respond to that, here's where we potentially, not that we differ, because I don't think we differ in a lot of things, but in some of the strategies. So I'm slightly obsessed with things like, you know, facts and getting, you know, statistics and all that. I think it's the accountant's brain in me. So there have been a lot of things said, as you say, in the public domain, you know, that are or aren't true. There's a lot of racist tropes, a lot of old stereotypes that are kind of being brought out because, you know, they get votes. That's the reality of it. One of the things that I heard, and I was talking with a friend of mine, there are these tropes now out there around sexual offenders, right? Because of that whole story being blown up. So one of my favorite shows on BBC Radio 4 is More or Less, where they debunk statistics. And I sent them an email. I was like, I've heard somebody say that, asylum seekers from this particular country, I think it's from Afghanistan, it was being reported in the press, are 20 odd times more likely to commit these offences. And I wrote to this program, I was like, I want you to look into that statistic. So today at 4:30 on Radio 4, they're going to be delving into that statistic. And I'm like, I need to listen to this, because I think there is something about, we certainly in a social media climate and everything, we don't look for facts enough. We're kind of just driven by these algorithms that just sort of drive division, offend people just jump on the bandwagon, and then all of a sudden we've just got flags all over the place. that's kind of where it all leads to, right? So it's pretty balmy, but let's try and debunk some of these myths that are out there. Let me just circle back into the comments for a second. Good morning, Safia. Do nothing carries risk, but people think it doesn't. Silence is not a strategy that is sustainable, because it leaves a leadership and information vacuum that will be filled by speculation and misinformation, which effectively one could argue is kind of what we're seeing now in a way, where there is a vacuum, or where people don't speak out about certain things. People fill the vacuum and get really clever with how they do it. Interesting. So we've talked there a little bit just about speaking up and saying the right things. I want us to sort of potentially just start to bring this to a close, because I'm conscious of the time. We could just keep going forever, to be honest. Sal, I'd be comfortable with that. But let's just get into the practicalities of it, in terms of what there is that leaders should be doing, but also what can organizations do. And when I say this, I'm thinking about organizations that I know at the moment are literally saying to individuals in their organizations, when it comes to, for example, talking about certain topics or standing up for certain topics, the organizations are actively saying to individuals, that's too political, you can't go down that road. What should organizations and leaders be doing to support individuals and to create a climate where leaders can display and exercise moral courage? How do we do this?
I think there's two different things, isn't there? There's the stuff around world politics and where it sits and belongs in the workplace, and that's just an open debate, isn't it?
Yeah,
we've seen a greater willingness to do that in 2020, and now we're seeing that willingness retreating largely. And I suppose we're just trying to understand how that sits, where that sits. There. ERGs, perform a really important function in organizations. They allow space, but I suppose the space is the impact on individuals, because we don't live in a vacuum. So when all this conversation, a national conversation is happening around racism, and we have people suffering racist incidents, these are people that work inside organizations that are suffering this outside of work, and that are coming in expected to carry on and continue in the same vein. And that's a very difficult thing to do. So there's a different experience for many of us at the minute if you have a certain level of melanin in your skin and you come from a certain ethnic background to those who don't. And that impacts us, and we become weathered by it. And some of us have different resilience to it and some different levels of tolerance. But it becomes, whether we understand it or not, it comes down to mental health and well-being. Yeah. So as if you're talking about the responsibility of employers and where leadership comes, I think that's where leadership comes. Something as basic as this, checking in with your people. Are you okay? I can't tell you how powerful that is when it comes unexpectedly. People just asking, "Are you all right?" and saying it sincerely, not at the start of your email. Whenever it starts to "I hope you're okay," and then goes into like 3 paragraphs of the thing that they need from you. But what if that was just the email or the conversation? How you doing? I've seen
Yeah.
the news. Do you want to chat? And just
Yeah.
people taking a genuine interest
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
well-being. I've had it rarely, but when I've had it, I've remembered every single occasion because it's shown an act of kindness and compassion. And I think
Hmm.
when you're feeling it, those acts of kindness and compassion, they land with you. And and every single organization, every single person with leadership responsibilities or not, even if you're a colleague, the act of checking in
Yeah.
right now, I think, is something we can all do, and I'd really
Yeah.
encourage.
Yeah. I love that because by checking in, and as you say, Sal, uh, make that your only intent of the conversation, or the email or the exchange or whatever. You don't have to express a political view. You don't have to get into the whys and wherefores. You're actually, it kind of goes back to humanity, which there is just, you're just basically, the human in you is responding to the human in front of you, and just literally asking them how they are. It doesn't have to be political. um yeah, that's a really great place to start. That's a really great place to start exercising that muscle, and then actually by having that exchange, that may ignite more in you, in terms of potentially additional conversations as well. So yeah, that's probably a good place to go ahead. Sal, do you want to add something?
I'm just going to share. I've just share a story very quickly. I've had a lot
Sure,
of
go
different
ahead.
experiences in my career. Lots. I wouldn't have had much of a book if I didn't. It'd have been very thin. Um, One of the things I experienced was in an organization was much more junior. Somebody was really bullying me, and they were my manager, and they were just making my life horrible. And it was really difficult, really difficult. At one point, I noticed that they were struggling, and they were upset. And even though they were making my life horrible, for just a moment, I
Yeah.
went, "Are you okay?" Because it was just us two in the office. And then they just let it all out that their mother was sick, and all this stuff that they were dealing with. And I just listened. I just listened, and I just,
Yeah.
just you talked about that basic humanity point, and you know
Yeah.
what happened after that, Cheryl? After that evening, and and I just went back home. I didn't think anything of it,
Yeah.
and the bullying stopped. The bullying stopped, Cheryl, literally
Mm,
overnight, and that person was actually kind and nice to me after that. And it was just a really weird reflection that sometimes, even when it seems impossible, right, reaching across the divide and just
yeah.
acting as a human being, what it can do.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really powerful. I think we'll wrap it up there. The thing about humanity, because even we've touched on some tricky subjects, but I've got this view, and I'm talking to lots of employee networks and stuff, and you're right. We're supporting uh, groups and communities that are going through a lot. Whether it's racism, transphobia, homophobia, conflicts, etc. There's a lot that people are feeling the effects of. But I've just got this theory of we just need to take it back to
Well, just wait and see if Cheryl comes back on. Don't know if it's my connection or hers. Sorry, I can't even see the comments. I'm just going to check on LinkedIn if I can see any comments. So I think I've just checked on LinkedIn, so it is me. That's all right now. You're just staring at me. I'm staring at you. Oh, there we go. We've got Cheryl back.
Wow. Apologies, Sal. Let me just bring you back onto here. Here we go. Wow. Do you know what? That's the first time that's ever happened. My Wi-Fi just died on me. Yeah. That clearly means it was time to end the conversation. Sal, did you hold the fort?
No, I was absolutely terrible. It was just awkward, me staring, not understanding if it was my Wi-Fi or yours. I was just going to start going onto LinkedIn, looking at the comments. So I'm very sorry, everybody. That was as awkward for me as it was for you.
It's absolutely fine. Yeah, that's never happened before. But I think we're gonna call it there. Sal, thank you again. I think you were one of the first people that I had when I started doing these when I started regularly doing these LinkedIn lives a couple of years ago and kind of like landing a slot. I think it's been almost 3 years now. It's been about just over 2.5 years that I've been consistently going live every week. And yeah, thank you for coming back on. You're one of a very, very small group that has been on more than once.
Well, I'm privileged. What can I say? What a compliment. Thank you, Cheryl. And I just want to say, you always hold space so well. And how you conduct and how you project yourself on LinkedIn is exactly how you hold a conversation. So thank you very much.
Oh, thank you. And thank you to everybody in the comments and for bearing with us through the technical glitch. Safia says you were very calm, Sal. Okay, fine. You're very calm. Thank you all for staying with us. And if you're watching this on the replay, thank you for taking an hour out of your day to check in with us. If you want to know more about what Sal does, obviously LinkedIn's the place, right? The book is called True North. I think Martin was asking what the book is called. The book's True North. And Sal, also, you're available for talks. You're doing leadership training as well, leadership development training. So if people feel that their leaders need a bit more encouragement to have some moral courage, then Sal is the person to get in, right?
Thank you, Cheryl. Yeah, so surprisingly enough, I'm talking about moral courage and trying to share some learning around it. So yeah, if you're interested, then you find me on LinkedIn.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you, everybody, and have a great weekend. I will see you next week, technology permitting.
Thanks, everyone.